Is it wrong of me to have a nostalgia for the early 8th console generation?
It's just that visceral, tactile, authentic war experience that only Call of Duty delivers.
Outstanding. Well, look, I hope we see more soon. But until then, let's check out a trailer. Call of Duty Infinite Warfare.
It was just so bad in so many strange yet predictable ways. Where the 7th console generation inherited the 6th flair, creativity, and genuine craft, and then subsequently shed itself of all such boons, the 8th gen came out of the gate like a racehorse on tranquilizers. I mean really, those first few years of the PS4 and Xbox One were awful, with little to no first-party titles for either console, coupled with a string of high-profile server hacks, scalping, that incredibly dumb Kinect controversy, this incessant policy of keeping most of the games scaled back enough to have ports for previous gen, just made it so bad. Bad business practices became the norm almost instantly, something that the previous generation had to work up to rather than being born with, which seriously undermined the new era's credibility and marketability, and which also afflicted the new console generation even more. But what I think characterized it the most was the infantilization of the consumer base, or, well, at least more than they did already. Content was stripped from games in favor of flashy but ultimately worthless visuals and marketing points to try and sell the most bare-bones product imaginable. That's the norm now, but originally it was a shockingly frustrating thing to experience. This was your Destinies, Assassin's Creeds, your Call of Duty Ghosts, Watch Dogs, Thief reboots. Not all things were bad, mind you, and one pay pig that the larger publishers could rely on were their multiplayer shooters, still going strong from their 7th gen boom. People still played COD even though they hated it, still played Battlefield because it didn't suck yet, still played Halo, or, well, they tried to play Halo. These games were still the big hotness, but clearly their age was showing. Ghost was received poorly, Halo 4 had sucked real bad a few years back, and Battlefield 4 was just the best, but we didn't know it at the time. If the genre was going to survive, developers were going to need to think big. They needed to do something that was anathema to their very core being. They had to innovate. Now, innovating is hard, especially if you're, say, a former Call of Duty developer who just opened your own studio and are now working on a big console-selling project for Microsoft. If you're gonna make it in this genre, then you gotta go big. So what's something that's big? Buildings are big, but Battlefield 4 already has those. How about planets? Those are big, but I can't imagine a cosmic shooter doing well in the market. Okay, how about planets are important or in space or something? It's sci-fi now, fuck it. Something that's big, something that shoots and is big. I don't know, man. I'm gonna take a break. I got tickets to the movies. We're gonna see Clash of the Titans, because it's 2010 or something. Oh shit, wait a minute. I think the original Titanfall can best be described in retrospect as trailer bait in its purest form. You know what I mean. There's these games that you used to see at E3, back when we had an E3 at least, where they just show some gameplay that actually wasn't real gameplay. It was just some of the devs LARPing, pretending to actually play their game.
Whoa, it's another group of players. Brace for PvP.
No time to explain. We're being flanked by 2 different enemy squads in this online multiplayer battle royale game. We need to brace for PvP.
Dude, did you prepare bullet points for this?
This was most common with multiplayer games, and from this you'd get stuff like The Division, or Evolve, any modern Halo title. It could also be used for single player too. Stuff like Watch Dogs certainly comes to mind. This stuff verges on that classic term of bullshot, where a game's advertising tries to portray the actual gameplay in one way, while it actually plays totally different. Remember Killzone? It was the Killzone thing. Titanfall should have been that. It's a cool dude sci-fi shooter with interesting mobility and big robots stomping around all in the same game. It oozes tech demo. It reeks of a system seller game with no real substance. And really, Titanfall 1 was exactly that.
There's just not much else surrounding the game. There needs to be far more meat on it.
The original Titanfall was lambasted for its lack of content and its total removal of a single-player campaign, a trend that will occasionally resurface every few years to remind you that yes, this industry has absolutely no standards. And really, it should have ended there. EA had made sure another abomination was inflicted upon the world, counted its coins, and would have made for the hills if this were any other ordinary failure. and yet for some strange reason they didn't. They greenlit a sequel with the prerequisite that it fix everything the first failed to accomplish, with a simple hand wave to get it done. Respawn, perhaps disappointed in themselves or just scared that insolvency was right around the corner if they didn't please their masters, got right to work on a brand new title. One that had no right to compete with its rival releases, by the way. 2016 was a packed year for releases, and frankly, it wouldn't have been a bad idea to delay their new game to the following year, especially since their release date was tapped to literally be in competition with Call of Duty Infinite Warfare and Battlefield 1. It's safe to say that neither EA nor players as a whole expected all that much out of a Titanfall sequel, even if there was going to be a single-player mode. With what was shown before, could Respawn actually perform? Well, cut to almost a decade later, and Respawn are one of the most profitable, not that it's saying much, mind you, developers in the industry, with enough clout from Star Wars and Apex Legends to make sure they're going to be just fine in the future. And it's all thanks to their Hail Mary toss. That's because there's something about Titanfall 2.
Stand by for Titanfall!
Somehow, by some miracle, Titanfall 2 turned out to maybe be one of the best shooters ever made. Now I say maybe because that's really a contentious thing to say, and you can blame that solely on boomer shooter fans who can't keep their dick in their pants. Here, let's piss them off real quick. Reloading always rustles their jibbies. Anyways, Titanfall 2 was a genuine iteration on the original, managing to fix most, if not all of its problems, outside of being a multiplayer-only title. Things like much better weapon and Titan balancing, improvements to traversal, a more varied selection of equipment and options for play, and finally, a full understanding and implementation of what made Titanfall 2 an actually fun game. It was a full send on recognizing the importance of mobility over gunplay. Now, there's a very unfortunate pattern for many games where a question arises of what in a player's arsenal is actually more important or more powerful, actual combat ability or highly effective mobility. And the correct answer is always the latter. It's always mobility. Take the gaping maw in reality that is League of Legends.
Fine, I'm not upset. I'm not upset that my junglers walked to Cassante twice and got him 2 kills. I've been ganked twice and died. I am not upset.
The overwhelming majority of new champion releases will include, in some way, one highly effective mobility skill or boost in their base kit. The most obvious is dashes, which I genuinely struggle to think of a new champion that didn't have one. This is because mobility is just that good. It's as much a utility as it is a combat-related skill to have. You can close the distance, you can disengage, you can dodge, or do all sorts of other things so long as you're more mobile than your opponent, which makes it just outright better than straight up damage or something. A simple conundrum was rearing its head in the first-person shooter genre. The basic combat loops of your CODs and the like had begun to really wear out their welcome. And so developers decided the best way to fix that was to make the game more engaging by making it faster. And that was a bad idea. Call of Duty nowadays is almost too fast. It rewards absurd rushdown gameplay with a small set of easy-to-use and high-damage weaponry. At the time that Titanfall was coming out, the movement shooter genre was entering its most frustrating stages. COD was going all in on boring sci-fi nonsense, with little in the way of true gameplay innovations, outside of implementing like a double jump. Ooh, whoa, ooh, amazing. Titanfall was always intended to be a movement shooter, practically popularized it all on its own, but the original had some serious hang-ups. The weapon in Titanfall didn't really support the run-and-gun gameplay that a movement shooter encourages, and pilots weren't actually that fast to begin with, meaning that the mobility that was supposed to keep you alive didn't really help you at all that much. Its movement, as well as its giant stompy robots, came off as one thing, a gimmick. one that couldn't carry the game solely from its novelty. That's where Titanfall 2's improvements come in. Titanfall 2 made the movement shooter actually viable in one way, emphasizing how powerful speed is when you have it, and emphasizing how important it is when you lose it. Titanfall 2's movement was much faster, much more intense than the first game. Pilots can pick up some ludicrous speed with skillful movement, being able to navigate maps and areas very, very fast. That speed makes you very hard to kill and lets you outpace pilots who are playing slower or who favor a different variety of weaponry that doesn't allow for faster gameplay. Every pilot has the ability to go this fast, regardless of what they're carrying. And with the way maps are laid out, you can pick up that speed pretty easily to make rotations without needing to fumble with your controls. Not to mention, it's just fun to pick up that kind of speed. Traversal is a skill that isn't always seen as something that's actually skillful. There's just one problem. That movement sounds pretty strong, huh? Well, that's because it is, like I said before. Movement is just that strong in games, so how do you balance out the awesome power of a pilot's mobility? Well, it's in the name of the game, isn't it? You use something that mobility can't actually hurt. Titans break up the potential monotony of movement shooter gameplay in two ways. One, it's just really fun to stomp around a Titan, and two, as a pilot, you can't directly engage a Titan even if you are being highly mobile. In Titanfall 2, all players in a match come equipped with their own anti-Titan weapon, like a rocket launcher or laser gun or something. But all these weapons tend to give away your position when you fire them, which leaves you open to retaliation from Titans who are actually paying attention. That makes you hide as much as it makes you move around. If you play coy with your opponent, they'll just pop you like a grape with a shot from their cannon, or turn you into mist with a hail of gunfire. In the original, Titans were just glorified kill streaks. Their role was to let you get more kills, not to facilitate a change in player behavior. This was in part because Titans were basically just humans but scaled up. You picked a weapon loadout like you were still on foot, and the Titans didn't have any character outside of just how they looked. In Titanfall 2, on the other hand, your big killing machines have gotten a total overhaul. All of them have unique playstyles, strengths and weaknesses. Some are good at range, others like to fight up close, and they all have the little touches to make them feel more like they're your Titan. They'll have their own unique operating system voice. They give actually useful information to you, like how many enemy Titans are fighting you so you can focus on the shooting. Without the Titans, you just have a bog standard boring movement shooter, something that games like Black Ops 3 suffered from. It's a basic tenet of multiplayer games that adding things like vehicles helps to make a match's gameplay loop more intense and varied, as opposed to just having another on-foot gameplay. Movement shooters always devolved into sweat fests, where you weren't allowed to have fun anymore. Everyone is trying to move as fast as possible to get their Twitch stream clips instead of playing a fun, silly match. Titanfall 2's mechs make games slow down, while instances where players don't have their Titans will make the match speed up. And when playing attrition, that's the mode most people play, it becomes even more dynamic. Maybe you're not the best at taking on players. Well then, you can always style on the AI opponents who still contribute to your team's score if you take them out. It always gives players a distraction, giving their opponents more chances to take them out and work towards getting their Titan, or taking back the lead. All in all, your typical Titanfall 2 match is extremely dynamic. Good pilot players can mop up the early game, but players who favor Titans can stump them later on through smart play and map control. It just works perfectly. Even matches of Halo aren't this tight when it comes to how the sandbox interacts. Everything just feels fair, even if your team is obviously not doing as good as the other. Losing a match doesn't even really mean you lost. The losing team has the chance to escape in their shuttle while the winning team tries to stop them, and all respawns are turned off. The losing team just needs to kill the enemy team once to guarantee their escape and a little bit of their dignity. Compare that to the stomps in other titles where the losing team is just begging, praying that the next esports competitive patch adds a mercy rule. Or if you're League of Legends, reducing the time before you could vote to surrender. You know, more than they've already reduced it at least. All these changes were in service to making the multiplayer, which really is the main draw of Titanfall, that much better, trying to deliver on an experience that original E3 reveal tried to advertise. From the beginning, this was supposed to be a multiplayer project, which begs the question, how did they manage to translate all this into a single player campaign? Well, as it turns out, it's pretty freaking easy, who would have thought? Titanfall 2's campaign might have actually ended up being more well-known and the most memorable part of the entire game compared to the multiplayer. And not just because, oh crap dude, they actually made one. Like that's some kind of achievement. But no, instead Titanfall 2 has a campaign that is extremely competent, that's fun, and which shows off the multiplayer mechanics in a controlled environment. It goes above and beyond by showing how much you can do when a shooter is actually taking advantage of its movement mechanics. You play as a grunt, a wimpy little rifleman like you mow down the multiplayer all the time, who's trying to become a pilot on the side. The tutorial's all about getting you accustomed to the power of being a pilot, and it's about to do the same thing for your Titan until you're pulled out of your little training thing to head to a real fight. Instantly, it's clear how screwed you are. You're a doughy little normal guy. You don't move fast, you don't have any real abilities, you just got a gun, and it's kind of disappointing. This is what every other shooter feels like. When your boy Lastimosa is smoked by the main antagonist of the game, he uses his last moments to transfer all his shit to you, Titan included. Now it's up to you and your giant fighting robot to complete the mission all by yourselves. What follows is a campaign that doesn't pull its punches, stratifying its levels into different playstyles that obviously comport to the entire game's design, pilot levels and Titan levels. While the first level focuses primarily on pilot navigation, each level after usually swaps between each type of gameplay. The level immediately after features a mix of Titan gameplay alongside larger navigation sections and combat areas, which culminate in a boss fight of all things. Now, I will be honest, the boss fights are just battles against stronger Titans except for the last two fights. But the fact that they decided to add more character to the mercenaries you're fighting shows a level of dedication that went above the original calling of just make a single player game. And the level right after this one proves it perfectly. This level is called Into the Abyss, and is primarily focused on pilot gameplay, taking place in this huge fuck-off factory that's building whole neighborhoods for the purposes of weapons testing. And it's as complicated as it sounds. The level consists of these massive moving platforms and walls they have to try and use to make it around the large, sprawling sets of combat areas without falling to your death like an idiot. And it's here that you can seriously show off just how much speed you can gain with proper movement. Needless to say, this section is an absolute joy to watch a speedrun of.
Promo here for our community. We have a $2,000 bounty on finding a skip for this level. So if you're a glitch hunter and you want to give it a shot, you can join our Discord. We do have all of our resources pinned for that. We would love a skip for this level.
It's crazy because clearly the huge backgrounds aren't really playable terrain, but somehow it feels like they are. Because you can build up enough speed to launch yourself across to each section, it feels like you could go even further. That you can reach out and touch the skybox. It's really just a 2D texture. And it's just so refreshing. I mean, it was refreshing almost a decade ago that a shooter put so much care and emphasis into the actual idea of a level rather than just having them as an obligatory addition. The massive moving platforms slowly assembling these prefabricated structures and environments throughout the level, only to have them be assembled at the end into its own combat arena it's just wild. It's an aesthetic that sticks in your mind for a long time after. But hell, it gets better. While that level features a large set of moving environments interspliced with combat encounters that you could basically just zoom past if you're so inclined, the next level goes even further with a gimmick that is actually the best thing ever. Okay, you want to know what's really weird? Dishonored 2 came out the same year as this game, and it too also had a level about jumping between two different points in time to navigate the level, just like Titanfall. And they're the best levels in both games. It's so weird, but I digress. Now suddenly it's a big combat gauntlet about jumping between timelines to figure out just what in the world these darn bad guys are doing, man. What the heck, guys? You can't go fucking around with time like that. Every level has something to it, whether it's the grand scale of the action, the environment, the actual challenges presented to the player, new enemies and weapons for BT, those pesky boss fights. It's got the design outline of something like Ratchet & Clank, not a first-person shooter. Every level tries to differentiate itself from the last to make sure it doesn't fall into the trap of the modern gray-brown action shooter. And that's especially exemplified by the stars of our show, Cooper and BT. Cooper is a pretty chill guy, all things considered. Despite surviving another horrible battle and having the responsibility of saving the day placed solely on his shoulders, he's taking the whole becoming a badass killing machine pretty well. He's got his own little dialogue quirks, there's enough of him there to be a character, though he is also a blank enough slate to let the player take the wheel without feeling constrained. He's basically the best of both worlds when it comes to either a straight-up silent protagonist, or one that basically never shuts up. But really, he is not the actual star of the show here, it's BT who we're all really here to see. BT is your Titan best friend who, unlike your real-life associates, actually cares about you enough to throw you around like a football, and help annihilate your foes with ruthless, overwhelming firepower. To be honest, everyone kinda knew what was gonna happen. BT is a robot, so he's kinda like awkward, but he also warms up to you and becomes your buddy. However, you're in a war zone, so you have to kill people, and it's all real dangerous. And I mean, come on, they're gonna fucking kill BT at some point.
Say goodnight.
But even though you see it coming before even starting the game, BT is still genuinely endearing. It is also actually useful. He's your Titan, and since you're jumping in and out of him to kick ass, it means you're constantly in contact with him, so you have some level of attachment when his violent murder/heroic sacrifice happens. And that's the other real advantage of the Titans, both in multiplayer and just in general. They have that genuine character I talked about. They're not like any other enterable vehicle in a shooter, and Titanfall 2 takes advantage of that in the most obvious yet effective way possible. And it's just nice, man. It's a nice time. It's funny to compare Titanfall 2 with other modern games because it somehow feels much older than it actually is. That's design priorities that modern devs just don't care about. Like remember the concept of the level? Like, oh, each one is unique visually and mechanically. You're not the same thing. They're not in a fucking open world. It's just the level. It's level this one. It's level that one. You go to the level. Nowadays, you're lucky if your open world has anything resembling an aesthetic or mechanic, let alone some actual gameplay. It's got a good multiplayer and a good single player, which was a 6th and 7th gen standard that died courtesy of multiplayer only titles like the first goddamn Titanfall. And what's worse, Titanfall 2 is so good it kept Respawn alive, so that they could inflict Apex Legends on the world. Apex Legends is the exact anathema of Titanfall 2. It's multiplayer only in the worst ways. It only has movement gameplay. Titans are obviously absent. It follows the trend of battle royales instead of attempting to capture a different audience or player base. It annihilated its world in favor of fucking... Man, I don't even know, like, what... What's up with modern game aesthetics? Like every other game was like, man, you know what would be cool? If we took our generic brown and gray shooters and turned them into generic purple and pink shooters? I mean, really?
Okay. Call me at 555. Come on now. That's the number. You call it and I'll answer it, and I don't care what I'm doing.
People still like Titanfall 2. People still play Titanfall 2. It's a game that punched above its weight so good, it let its developers make something that they actually cared about, that let them take an idea to its final conclusion, something that other games rarely get a chance to try. It's the kind of shooter that understood what the point of a shooter was, which, ironically, isn't shooting. It's what you're shooting at, why you're shooting at it, and how you actually shoot to begin with. Whether you're wall running and blasting grunts, fragging an enemy with your quickscope skills, or vaporizing an enemy Titan with your laser beam face. It's all put together to create something that by its very nature can't just devolve into yet another boring shootout. Its single player showed the strength of their design not just in PvP, but its potential to create a genuinely powerful world and narrative, along with just being fun, bringing back the kind of spectacle you'd only see in something like God of War 3. There's no plans for a third game, somehow, but I can't imagine it's gonna stay that way for too long. Too many people have fond memories, genuine attachments to Respawn's truly impressive achievement in the genre. Within the confines of their modern, depressing battle royale trash fire is the DNA of something great, just waiting to make its comeback. That's because there's something about Titanfall 2.
BT! Got you.
What a sorry state we're in.